Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I think we're getting the sense that we have leveled off somewhat.
The end of Omicron. When will it come, and how boosters are playing a vital role? Also,
part of the challenge is that as humans, we don't plan for extremes very well.
as one Metro Vancouver city leads the way in flood mitigation, the rest of the province is being told it needs to follow suit, and fast.
It's a newborn.
And a baby boom in the Salish Sea. While whale watchers say it's a banner year.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Well, there's hope from BC health officials that there will be a leveling off of COVID-19 cases in the coming weeks. And while restrictions and limits on gatherings are set to remain in place, Anita Bathe tells us the province is looking at what people can do safely.
Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says the province could soon see a decline in COVID cases, but there's still pressure on the healthcare system. She expects this wave to last for the next several weeks.
I think we're getting the sense that we have leveled off somewhat, and if we look at what we're seeing in other jurisdictions that have been ahead of us in terms of this wave around Canada and around the world, we may be entering soon into the place where we will see a decline.
She says hospitalizations are going up. Some patients have the Delta variant, others Omicron. Henry notes 3 people in their 20s and another in their 30s are among those in intensive care, and all of them are unvaccinated.
But if you are unvaccinated, you don't have that protection, and your personal risk has gone up dramatically in some communities. You are also at higher risk, if not having that priming of your immune system, at higher risk having severe illness and ending up in hospital.
Henry says antiviral drugs could be on their way to BC later this month to help treat COVID-19 infections. More rapid tests are also en route, but will not be made widely available to the public. Health Minister Adrian Dix says more community pharmacies and vaccine clinics are being added to help administer booster shots.
Newly added appointments are in both pharmacies and health authority clinics. Anyone who has booked can continue to go back online and try to move up their booking if they wish, as capacity is coming on stream.
Health officials will be holding another news conference on Friday and release COVID-19 modeling data. Dr. Henry stresses that restrictions are still in place around gym closures and limits on gatherings, but says they are looking at what can safely resume. Anita Bathe, CBC News, Victoria.
Another 38 people are in hospital in BC with COVID-19. That brings the total number to 469 people, doubling since the new year. ICU cases have inched up to 97, and there are now 45 active outbreaks in the healthcare facilities across the province. 3 more people have died from COVID-19 since yesterday. Police in Kamloops say charges could be recommended against 5 people who refused to leave a superstore for not wearing masks.
Do you have your identification with you?
I don't need to show you that.
If you fail to provide your identification, you'll be arrested for obstruction. Do you understand?
Last night, police issued 43 fines after approximately 18 people refused to leave on their own. According to RCMP officers, attending the weekly protest billed as Maskless Monday initially tried to peacefully encourage the group to either wear masks or leave. In the past, customers and employees have been yelled at by anti-maskers, telling them to take theirs off. The 5 people arrested for failing to identify themselves are still under investigation, but they're no longer in custody. Well, Cypress Mountain is temporarily closed because of 2 of this year's biggest disruptors, chaotic weather and the COVID-19 pandemic. You're looking live right now at Cypress. The slopes are empty. The mountain says staffing shortages brought on by Omicron and the need for preventative maintenance in response to the atmospheric river are the causes for the closure. Anyone who bought passes for today or tomorrow will be contacted by resort staff. The plan is to be operating as usual on Thursday. Another atmospheric river is expected to hit the lower mainland tonight, and that could last until Thursday. Given the potential for further flooding, the province is extending the state of emergency until January 18th. On Maple Ridge tonight, crews have dropped off sand and sandbags as a precaution for homeowners who are concerned about potential flood impacts. City officials are asking people to bring their own shovels to access the sandbags. Residents have also been asked to clear any snow or debris from catch basins or storm drains. The city says its ability to salt roads ahead of the storm is limited, and it's asking people to exercise caution while driving. And in Abbotsford, Sumas Prairie residents are bracing for the worst.
The ground is frozen, and this is not from the dikes flooding or overflowing, right? This is from the rain and the snow, and the ground is flooded. So what's going to happen? I don't know. It's certainly a risk, and I hope we're not evacuated again, right? We've done twice already, so I'm hoping we're not.
Some Arnold residents who were spared by the flooding in November fear they could bear the brunt of the floods this time around. They say they've done little in terms of preparation and are now scrambling to protect their properties, as well as make plans to get their animals to higher ground. Let's head over to Richmond now. It's a city that sits right at sea level and at the mouth of the Fraser. Now, back in November, when the first set of atmospheric rivers hit the lower mainland, Richmond's extensive dike and drainage system saved it. Tonight, Renee Filipponi is looking at what's being done to make sure things go as smoothly this time.
So we're at the Horseshoe Slough pump station.
There is work to be done at this Richmond pump station.
Because there's a lot of rain on the way we pump down more.
The pumps are fired up to lower the water level in the dikes. Richmond is surrounded by the Fraser River and sits only a meter above sea level.
We performed fairly well, even during the atmospheric rivers in November. Our expectation is this week around, the system will perform well again.
During the November floods, the city relied on 39 pump stations like this and 47 kilometers of dikes. Crews worked nearly round the clock to make sure these pumps kept working, moving 1 million gallons of water a minute.
The Fraser has hurtled out of the mountain passes and overflowed its banks.
Richmond has been hit hard by floods in the past, including this 1948 disaster. Since then, it's invested heavily in its diking and pumping system, receiving funding from all levels of government.
There's always more that can be done. Some of the larger urban centers where they've got a larger tax base and more staff capacity and more resources to look at this issue and to invest in flood risk reduction, they are in a better position than some of the smaller rural communities.
Those communities, like Abbotsford, have struggled to pay for infrastructure to prevent flooding, which is only expected to get worse.
As climate's changing faster than our infrastructure in most cases, we really do need to be thinking about and anticipating what those changes look like and be ready for things to become extreme.
Back in this Richmond neighborhood, residents along the banks of the Fraser would like the dikes raised even higher.
I feel pretty confident that the city does a pretty good job, but with that, global warming and the rising water is always a concern.
They will be watching the water level closely in the coming days, like so many across the region. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Richmond.
And residents across the lower mainland have been dealing with overflowing garbage and recycling bins for weeks, all since the winter cold snap made roads too treacherous for collection trucks. And as Eva Uguansenj reports, the frustration is getting real.
The rats get in, the seagulls, everything, raccoons, they just toss it around all over the streets, and it's a real mess.
For many Vancouver residents, it's been weeks since their garbage was collected, and some want more action from the city.
You complain, they sort of come and clean it up a little bit, but then the problem just comes back, and I feel like they should be taking more action against the owners of the building to actually make sure it gets dealt with properly.
Buildings with dumpsters like this one are responsible for contracting out garbage collection, but the city of Vancouver takes care of single-family homes.
We had 2 days, December 30th and 31st, where we had to cancel garbage collection because we just couldn't get down the roads. It was too much snow, too much ice. And we've been playing catch up since then.
It's led to a pileup of trash. And meanwhile, green bin collection has been put off for weeks.
When we have colder weather, it actually ends up being frozen inside the bins. So it's feasible for us to cancel our green bin collection, put all our drivers on garbage. So we did that. We started up green bin collection again this Monday.
The City of Vancouver says about 95% of the missed garbage bins have now been serviced. But Recycle BC is still playing catch up with the recycling bins it's responsible for.
A recycling truck is a single axle vehicle. It is lighter than a garbage or an organics recycling truck. And that makes it more difficult to navigate sometimes in these snowy conditions, these icy conditions, these slushy conditions.
It doesn't help that most Vancouver collection happens in narrow and sometimes steep laneways.
If a side street or an alley has not been plowed or sanded, that can make it extremely difficult to navigate. So, we're hoping also that municipalities will be out there clearing these roads as best they can.
Both the City of Vancouver and Recycle BC say the rainfall and warmer temperatures this week is good news, and crews should be able to pick up from any missed neighborhoods by the weekend. Eva Ugwensenge, CBC News, Vancouver.
Time now to check in with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. And Joe, you've got your hood on. We're in this atmospheric river event
We're in it
right now. Okay, so how much longer?
We've got another, Anita, 24 to 36 hours to go of this steady rain, warm temperatures, and rising freezing levels. Really just seeing this atmospheric river, the leading edge of it, move into Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley around 2 p.m. this afternoon. Before this, it was all the lead up. So a couple days of rain, but now we're in the real event. Let me show you the warnings in place. Rainfall across the south coast. That includes Metro Vancouver, the Sunshine Coast, the west side of the island, and the Fraser Valley, up to 150 millimeters. Now, I think those bullseyes will be out towards Tofino, and the North Shore, that's where we'll see the 100 millimeter plus, but even 75 millimeters across Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley possible, again, along with those rising freezing net levels. As we've spoken about earlier this week, the heavier snowpack should help the situation as far as not seeing a lot of additional melt from the alpine levels, but we still have a huge snowpack across other parts of Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley, including here in the North Shore, out towards Hope, Squamish, and Pemberton. We're still talking a meter plus of snow with a hard ice top that is not going to absorb a lot of that rain. The radar right now, again, just showing the heavier rain moving across the island. We'll continue to see that steady rain ramp up through the overnight, through all of Wednesday, easing Wednesday overnight into Thursday. By Thursday, we will be on the other end of this event, and most of the snow will have melted below 1,000 meters. But Anita, a lot of impact and a lot of sort of double-edged sword equations when it comes to this warm weather in the next 36 hours.
No kidding. Okay, we'll catch up with you in a bit, Joe. Thanks.
Sounds good. You're welcome.
The weather update is brought to you by Sophia Financial Group of Raymond James Limited. Register now for our free Cash Flow Connection series at sophiaevents.ca.
As we mentioned, BC's state of emergency has been extended a week because of the potential for more flooding, but it also is to ensure work continues on highways damaged by flooding and mudslides. Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth says getting highways repaired and reopened is essential to getting vital resources to British Columbians. The orders restricting travel on Highway 5 and 99 remain in place. That means the Coquihalla between Hope and Merritt is still limited to commercial vehicles only. The extended restrictions are also in place to ensure road conditions are safe for crews working on them. A hydro pole from BC's Nicola Valley has been found all the way into Wasson's Boundary Bay. It was discovered by a BC Hydro employee on Christmas Day after it traveled hundreds of kilometers down 3 rivers before finally ending up into Wasson. The pole was dislodged by flooding along Highway 8 in November. BC Hydro says this pole was installed in 2010 in the Shakin community. At least 60 other poles have gone missing since the storm hit nearly 2 months ago. Canadian flags are flying at half-mast outside Vancouver City Hall and a works yard tonight in memory of a longtime employee who died on the job. The fatal accident happened last Friday at the National Yard location near Strathcona Park. The victim, Gord Doliniak, was a truck driver with the engineering streets team. and had worked with the city for 32 years. Despite the efforts of staff and first responders, the 62-year-old succumbed to his injuries. WorkSafe BC and the City of Vancouver are doing their own separate investigations into his death. Well, as the uncertainty around in-person learning continues to grow amid rising cases of the Omicron variant, an increasing number of patients are turning to tutors for academic support. Some tutoring centers say 2021 was their busiest year ever. This is because of concerns by a number of parents that their children could fall behind. They say they noticed an increase in student signups in September. Many are high school students needing extra support with math. Those taking up extra tuition are also seeking to boost their marks ahead of their university applications. Well, the province has been ordered to compensate the owners of 2 seashell homes after they were forced to move because of the threat of giant sinkholes. The properties were put on a temporary local state of emergency, and homeowners told to evacuate in 2019 after the district deemed the area unlivable. The homeowners were collectively awarded close to $230,000. That's related to rent, moving costs, and the loss of enjoyment. The ruling says the province unlawfully maintained the state of local emergency, which is still in place, and the properties bought with the homeowners' life savings would be worth millions today. Instead, they were recently assessed at $2 each. Travelers in Prince George hoping to fly high may be in luck. A proposed cannabis store at the Prince George Airport will go to a public hearing after a vote by City Council last night. Last week, the Prince George Airport Authority and cannabis retailers co-pilot announced their plans to open the world's first airport cannabis store. Since then, Council approved the first 2 readings of a bylaw to amend the airport's zoning to allow cannabis sales. Now it's up to the public to submit comments to Council during the public hearing. If all goes well, clouds could part on the new store as early as next summer. And now for some encouraging news for whale watchers. 2021 was a record year for sightings and baby booms for a number of whale species, and they showed up in record numbers in the Salish Sea. The Biggs orcas were the most frequently documented, logging 1,067 unique sightings in 329 days. The previous record was in 2019, when 747 emerged in the Salish Sea. 11 new Biggs orca calves were born in 2021, but the humpback whale baby boom also saw some milestone numbers. 21 baby humpback whales accompanied their mothers to the Salish Sea from where they usually breed, from Hawaii or Mexico. That's up from 11 in 2020. Not all whale species appeared as frequently, though. The endangered southern resident killer whales were encountered the least often. For more on why more whales are gracing the waters of the Salish Sea, we're bringing in the Executive Director of the Pacific Whale Watching Association, Erin Gless. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Erin, how frequent are these sightings? So how many a day and where are they happening?
Yes, so we just finished compiling all of our 2021 stats. And of course, we're not out on the water every single day, weather permitting, but we were able to record whales on more than 300 days out of the year, and in many cases, almost every single day.
And what is it about the Salish Sea that's drawing more whales to come here now?
Yeah, so the Salish Sea is a really unique ecosystem. Our water stays cold all throughout the year. And if you're not familiar, cold water has more nutrients. So the fact that we have all of this cold water that's always mixing with the tides means that we're productive all throughout the year. So unlike some places where they just see whales for a few months, we have food for a variety of different types of whales through all 12 months of the year.
Well, and can you talk about that a little bit more? Because I know the food web does influence the types of whales that are coming here and the ones that are avoiding here.
Yes. So we have kind of 5 main types of whales that we could encounter here in the Salish Sea. There's 2 different types of orcas. We have the Biggs killer whales, sometimes called transient killer whales, which feed on marine mammals. And then the other type of orca, which is the southern resident killer whale, which feeds predominantly on Chinook salmon. And in addition to the orcas, we do have humpback whales, gray whales, and minke whales that also frequent the area.
Okay, and talking a little more about those southern resident killer whales, what is it that's causing that number to decline?
Yeah, so unfortunately, they are declining because their food source is also declining. So Chinook salmon have been challenged for quite a while. It's been a focus of conservation for decades. And unfortunately, we haven't unlocked the mystery as to how to solve it. But predominantly in this region, the Fraser River is really critical to southern resident killer whales. And since the Fraser River Chinook stocks have pretty much collapsed, we've noticed that every year southern residents are spending less and less time in the Salish Sea.
Okay, and finally, obviously this is all pretty encouraging news. Is there anything that people can do, that we can do, to make sure that these trends of seeing more whales in our waters continue?
Yes, so, unfortunately, because of the southern residents and all that coverage, a lot of folks are feeling a little bit hopeless, but we hope that this boom of big killer whales and humpback whales and other species can give hope. A lot of the protective actions are working. So working on pollution, addressing the issues of stormwater and, debris that's in the water, that's definitely something that we're happy that people are talking about. Vessel traffic, slowing down boats to make for a quieter habitat, that's benefiting other whales as well as the southern residents. And one of the big things, certainly for the southern residents specifically, is keep talking about salmon. We have to talk about how to get more salmon in the water, especially wild salmon. And you do that by restoring habitat. So a lot of habitat restoration projects and conservation projects are really going to be the key to making sure that southern resident killer whales recover like these other types of whales are also doing.
Erin Glass is the Executive Director of the Pacific Whale Watching Association. Thanks for joining us. Patrons of Vancouver's self-proclaimed nerd bar are bidding to take a piece of it home. From Han Solo replicas to the TARDIS from Doctor Who, dozens of prized items are up for auction. And as John Hernandez reports, it's a bittersweet farewell for the owner.
There's sports bars, so why not nerd bars? That's the question Jason Kapalka asked himself as he curated this eclectic collection.
It was a labor of love for us, and I think for a lot of customers, it was more than just a bar.
Over the years, the Stormcrow Ale House on Vancouver's Broadway Street has drawn large crowds and even big names like Elijah Wood.
The funniest time was when some people came in and they noticed he was sitting at a table underneath a picture of Frodo.
But the Geek Den is closing its doors at the end of the week, a byproduct of pandemic challenges and ongoing construction.
The final blow was just that, we had Omicron and all that stuff coming up, but also a series of other headaches, which, like the supply chain issues, labor shortages, and in our case, the Broadway SkyTrain construction.
So now an effort to find these items a new home through an online auction. Among the hottest ones, this frozen Han Solo replica.
So he's moved around a few times, but he's been a steady companion for us.
Or the Rancor head, priced at $25,000.
It's a one-of-a-kind thing. It's quite. I'm still pretty amazed at the detail on it. You can get it right up close, and it's all the skin and stuff like that is very realistic.
And who could forget Jar Jar in a jar?
At one point, we were filling it with fluid, and we were trying to figure out a way that we could actually maybe sell jar fluid, where we'd sell shots of some sort of liquor out of it. And we did actually try it briefly. The problem we had was that it was just too disgusting looking, and nobody bought it.
The prized collection took years to gather and is estimated to have cost upwards of $100,000. But it's not all up for sale. Some items will stay in Kapalka's personal collection. As for which ones,
that's a secret. We'll see what stays and what goes.
Kapalka says he might just open a new location down the road, and if and when he does, he'll have plenty of walls to redecorate. But at least he won't be starting from scratch. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
If you're in Quebec and not planning to get a vaccine, a message from the government today: you'll pay. The plan to tax the unvaccinated is coming up. Thanks for staying with us on our commercial-free live stream. Well, vets are reminding pet owners that cold weather means taking precautions with furry family members. While there's everything from dog boots to parkas out there, vets say owners still need to be observant and cautious. CBC video producer James Young got some tips.
The same issues that hit humans can hit animals in this cold weather. The biggest issue, though, is that they can't talk and tell us that they're cold. So it's up to us to watch for signs that they're not doing well outside. Those signs could be things like shivering, just like we would do, and very commonly with dogs is picking their paws up, and because their paws tend to get cold fastest, and so they do a little dance where they're holding a paw up or two paws up, and that's when we know it's time to take them inside.
Plus 30, minus 35 like today, we don't miss a day regardless. 30-second walks is the max we can do with the weather before their paws freeze up. Leave the truck running, locked of course, and then throw them in and they can warm up and then back we go.
Just because you have booties for them and you have a jacket, it doesn't mean that they're not going to get cold. And when we dress, we're fully dressed. Dogs, you can never get them completely dressed, and there's always going to be some spots that are exposed and where they can be at risk for frostbite. Especially in dogs, we'll see it on paws occasionally. The other area that we see it a lot is on the ears, and that's in both dogs and cats. Frostbite won't show up for a half hour to an hour after the damage is actually done. So you'll look at their paw or at their ear tips and it looks perfectly normal, and then all of a sudden, maybe the next day you see that they've lost some hair on the tip of their ear and then it's turning a different color. So by the time we recognize that, it's too late. Another important thing, a lot of people think, oh, he's really cold, I'm gonna put a heating pad around him or I'm gonna put their paws in warm water. That makes things worse. Let them warm gradually inside, just like we do. If you do recognize changes that are indicative of frostbite, you should see your veterinarian. So we have to be smart about it. Even if they have bulky coats on and boots, they can still be prone to problems.
Quebec is under some of the strictest public health measures, including curfews. None of this is good news for the public or for the government. And as Sarah Levitt explains, it's already led to finger-pointing and a high-profile resignation.
It's a big deal.
As hospitalizations rise, Premier François Legault is targeting the unvaccinated.
They put a very important burden on our healthcare network.
So he says a tax is coming for those who aren't vaccinated, but with little detail on how the tax will work, only that it will be significant.
This is a total improvisation from the Premier. Obviously, he looked at some polls and said, hey, we should be coming up with this idea.
Now people will be talking about this new policy idea, maybe not spending too much time thinking about, why Dr. Arruda left.
That's Dr. Horacio Arruda, who just last night resigned as Quebec's public health director. In a letter, Arruda says he's been the source of much criticism lately, writing that it is undoubtedly causing some erosion of public support. Criticism over how the province has handled Omicron, including reinstituting the curfew. Arruda offered to resign. Legault accepted.
You could have just refused this or talk him out of it. So I think that for the premier, it's probably convenient politically.
At first, Arruda was something of a pandemic celebrity who delivered grim news with personal anecdotes and folksy charm. But as the pandemic continued, the fact Arruda often appeared alongside the premier raised questions.
The distinction between detached scientific advice and the political decision-making, I think, is blurred.
All of this is happening as the province's hospitals deal with the worst pressure of the pandemic.
If it continues and we cannot handle all those hospitalizations, we might come to a point where we're going to have to ask ourselves, can we offer all those treatments to all the patients that walk in the door?
A scenario that also raises pressure on Quebec's government. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Well, first, testing centers were overwhelmed, then hospitals flooded with COVID patients. Now, as Omicron tears across Canada, we're seeing a surge in severe outcomes because of just how much COVID there is out there. As Ellen Morrow explains, places like Ontario are bringing in new measures to keep up.
The pandemic's toll etched across the face of Toronto nurse Iram Chogala.
Just in one shift, we had approximately 4 or 5 patients that had to be transferred to the ICU because they were COVID positive and they were severely short of breath. Nurses are very drained, they're tired, they're burnt out, they're stressed.
Ontario's Omicron surge with its crushing staffing shortages is leading some Ottawa hospitals to consider a desperate measure, asking COVID-positive staff, even those with symptoms, to work.
The alternative is having nobody. So, there's 2 bad paths forward, and you're just trying to take the least bad path.
Quebec announced a similar move last month, and in Alberta, COVID-positive essential workers like healthcare staff are also allowed on the job as hospitalizations across Canada continue a steep upward climb.
It's very disconcerting. We have rises in hospitalization that are truly exponential, more of the inpatient side than on the intensivist side, but still both are going up.
Across the country, in New Brunswick, hospitalizations are at a record high. The province is projecting infections will soar more than tenfold by the end of the month.
This will impact not only our healthcare system, but also other critical services, such as fire departments, police departments, power services, and so on.
To ease the pressure in Ontario, internationally trained nurses will now be allowed to work in overburdened hospitals and long-term care homes.
Absenteeism right now, I would say, is really the big strain on the system.
A strained system Chogala helps to hold up every day.
It is a real crisis. It's a harsh reality that people on the outside, they don't look in, but I can attest to that because this is what we see on a daily basis.
That's the CBC's Ellen Morrow reporting tonight. Now, as much of the country deals with a cold snap, the frigid weather is adding an extra layer of discomfort and even danger for those without shelter. As Cameron McIntosh explains, high demand and staff shortages are forcing some homeless shelters to turn people away.
As dangerous temperatures keep hold over Winnipeg, Jay Hazel isn't moving. He would rather stay in this bus shelter than a homeless shelter. He and his wife have been here a month.
I want to be alone, really be rules and whatever.
That's provided there's even room. A combination of a brutal cold snap and rising Omicron numbers has shelters in many cities struggling for space and staff. In Montreal, a man died last night in the cold as its largest shelter scrambles to keep up with demand.
It's a really tough time. It's a really tricky situation. And we're doing our very, very best to track it down.
Similar problems in Toronto and Ottawa, where even if there is room or staff, many people are fearful of being in enclosed spaces where they could get infected.
So people are sleeping rough for that reason. Many of our people who are homeless feel safer outside, but this Canadian winter changes.
One positive, Ottawa is one of several cities expected to see a brief break from the cold.
Dangerously cold. We've been really spoiled this winter. In fact, for the last several years, we've been spoiled in Eastern Canada. We haven't really had this caliber of cold, and it's potentially dangerous. So if you have to go out, make sure you take the necessary precautions.
Back in Winnipeg, StreetLinks Outreach is trying to get to those who can't or are unwilling to come in.
We've noticed that we are picking up the slack.
For now, Hazel is staying put with his wife.
We've been together 12 years. A lot of places they split you up.
Even with a break in the cold, there's still a lot of winter ahead. The pandemic's not letting up. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
They aren't jobs that pay particularly well in very affluent areas, but a lack of affordable housing means attracting people into lower-paying jobs is a real challenge. Why there are too few bus drivers in the Sea to Sky, next.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Japanese tourists don't just bring their skis and their courteous manners to Whistler. 29,000 Japanese skiers dropped $21 million here last year. And like any good business, the resort wants to please its best customers. So instructor Dean Capstick speaks Japanese.
I'd say the majority of people on the mountain today are Japanese. So that the language is just going to become more and more useful as we go along in time. 10 years from now, who knows? Everybody's going to be speaking Japanese up here.
Boys and girls, today we're going to learn a new Japanese phrase.
Japanese is blossoming here, from kindergarten to elementary school,
Nandeska,
to high school. It is part of the curriculum. In 1987, 246 school kids were studying Japanese in BC. Now there are over 5,000, not including university and night school.
If I don't have a job, I can get a job in a business because Japanese business is so important to our economy.
True. Japan is Canada's second largest trading partner, and well over half of that trade is with BC. Yet all provinces should be teaching Asian cultures, says the head of Canada's Science Council.
We're living in a world where national boundaries are no longer as meaningful as they used to be.
Distribute the test booklet.
The Japanese government now holds a standard language exam in 22 countries, and Vancouver is the only North American location chosen. The students say Japanese will give them an edge. That, too, is what Dean Capstick found. His Japanese gives him an edge. It makes people from Japan feel welcome here, he says, and that will bring more business to Canada.
The 180 kilometers of narrow-gauge track runs from the port of Skagway in Alaska over the mountains and into Whitehorse. The railway was built at the turn of the century to service the gold rush boom. It tied in then with the company's own paddle wheelers that were hauling miners and supplies northwards on the river to Dawson City. The railway remains today Yukona's primary supply line of pretty well everything from apples to whiskey. But White Pass and Yukon says its trains will lose between $2 and $4 million this year. Closure of a mine recently cost them valuable backhaul contracts, and a decision on whether they can continue to run must now be made within a few weeks.
Hopefully, if we're going to develop and develop along orderly lines, the railroad should be extended further into the interior of the territory.
The railroad says it's raising rates immediately. Meanwhile, accountants are figuring out whether the prospect of pipeline construction and opening of new mines in the 80s heralds a sort of modern-day gold rush that can keep the trains running. Colin Holt, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The restrictions on gatherings and events are likely to remain unchanged for now. And in parallel, we are looking at what we can safely resume now that all businesses have COVID safety plans, starting to put those back in place again too.
Dr. Bonnie Henry says cases are leveling off, but will continue to watch other parts of the world that are ahead of BC. 38 more people are now in hospital since yesterday. 3 people in their 20s and another in their 30s are among those in ICU. All of them are unvaccinated. Maple Ridge is getting ready for heavy flooding with another atmospheric river set to come our way. Residents are being told to prepare to mitigate as much damage as possible. And in Abbotsford, people on the Sumas Prairie who were spared during November's bad storm are scrambling, worried they'll be hit hard this time. A lack of bus drivers because of COVID in the Sea to Sky corridor has forced the cancellation of school bus routes. The union and the school district say attracting new drivers to the area is a challenge. Beyond the hours and pay, the high cost of living in the Sea to Sky area are making the positions difficult to fill. The district is trying to fill the gaps in services with measures like providing public bus passes and working with the local transit on scheduling. Now that the labor and housing crunches are being amplified by the current Omicron wave, how can we address the issue? Let's dive a little deeper here and bring in UBC housing expert Penny Gerstein. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
This issue of not being able to find labor nearby isn't just a Squamish problem. Can you talk about what you're seeing with communities all over the province?
Yes. So, I mean, I think that, you know, we've talked a lot about. It has been very identified that there's serious housing problems in the larger communities. But I think that COVID and even before COVID, we've seen outmigration of people into smaller communities, mainly because of the cost of housing and other things and other kinds of opportunities. So that there really is right now all over BC a kind of housing crunch happening in smaller communities. The Squamish situation is really only one example, I think, of many across BC.
Well, there doesn't seem to be an end in sight either when it comes to housing affordability. You know, it's not suddenly going to get cheaper to live where you work. So what do you see happening if the problem continues to get worse?
Well, I mean, we need, and you know, lots of people have been saying this now, other kinds of experts, that we need a purpose-built rental, affordable purpose-built rental in all communities to provide opportunities for people who can get into the market. I also think what you need is sort of some real innovations, and I sort of point to one example is in Whistler Housing Authority, where they've been building, and this is for a number of years because they've recognized that they needed housing for the workforce there. They developed, the municipality created a housing authority with the significant employers, and they've built rental housing and even home ownership housing that is sort of geared to income.
Do you think that any of these solutions, though, can come fast enough, or are we going to end up in a situation where there's a lot of jobs that don't have workers to work them?
Yes, this is going to, we are going to be going to a crunch, and it's happening in all communities. And so I think, you know, we have to start having a coordinated sort of plan around this, around how to be addressing housing. I was very heartened that finally in the during the federal election, housing was very central. But what we really need to be doing is not thinking about just supply, but the right kind of supply to address the workforce, the people that that really need affordable housing.
Penny Gerstein, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Not the next day, not the next week, not even the next year, but Loli the cat did come back. We'll tell you how long she was wandering next. At 6:43, a live look tonight at Cypress Mountain. No skiers on the hill. The wet weather and Omicron are impacting operations there. So how long is this rain going to last, and will the snow return to the hills? Johanna, of course, has all the answers next.
The ocean plastic problem in the world is astonishingly bad. It's really hard to relate to the numbers because there's so much. Like right now, there's estimated to be 150 million tons of plastic in the ocean, breaking down into microplastics where it brings on a whole new world of issues. We
talk about this story a lot on our show about ocean protection and the scale of the global problem. I mean, it's huge. I think I've read every year 13 million metric tons of plastic are going into the ocean. So that, I think, is, they say it's one garbage truckload every minute. So when you think about that, every single minute of our lives, this amount of plastic, not to mention other ghost gear or pieces of garbage, are entering the ocean at that rate. It's really staggering to think about that.
In the 50s, taking seabirds as an example, plastics were studied, the volume of plastics in seabirds, and only 5% of seabirds had plastic in them then. In the 80s, it was 80%. And by 2050, it's projected that it'll be 99% seabirds. So it's not very far away.
1, 2, 3, 2.
That's funny. These people don't look different, but trust me, they are. And you can be too. And not in a weird way, but making a difference kind of way. Because together, wait for it, we can change climate change. Does that make sense? You bet your bottom dollar it does. And we're gonna find out how with a little help from a racing driver who never hits the gas.
Drive within the speed limit. People will love you.
Garbage stealing ninjas.
I can't believe someone threw these out.
Competing twins who race from A to B to reduce CO2.
Oh man, she's passing me again.
And this guy. Testing. But you won't believe what he does with plastic.
Make one shift in your behavior, then magic can happen.
So, ready to save the planet? Actually, the planet will be fine. What we need to save is us. Okay, like the plastic guy says, let's make some magic.
The BCSPCA is hoping you can help several puppies found living in horrible conditions. These are 2 of the 7, and they're getting stronger, but the agency says they were found in a trailer running loose with no visible food or water. Each dog was underweight and full of parasites, and one needs several rounds of blood work. The agency is asking for donations to help pay for vet care and neutering. It says once they're feeling better, the dogs will be great family members for someone. And if Loli the cat has some explanation for where she's been for the last 12 years, well, she's not saying. All her owner knows is that the cat disappeared from the family's home north of Toronto when she was about 2 years old and was picked up as a stray not too far away on New Year's Day of this year. Here's their story.
When she went missing and no one had found her, I just had to move on and, come to the conclusion that she wasn't going to be coming back. And then the cat came back. Hi, I'm Christine DeCastro, and this is Loli the cat, my long-lost cat from 11 years ago. I got Loli back in 2009 from the Toronto Humane Society, and in 2010, she, as an escape artist, escaped from my home in Richmond Hill. Looked for her all around the neighborhood, put up postings online, and there was no luck at all in finding her. And then now, 2022, New Year's Day, I got a call that your animal has been found. And they said, we have Loli. And I said, Loli? Loli was my cat from 2010. And they said, well, we've got her here at the Vaughan Animal Services if you'd like to pick her up. So I was in shock and quickly made plans with my partner to pick her up in the next couple of days. It's just been kind of a whirlwind to see my cat after 11 and a half years. She's microchipped, so it had to be my cat. When I saw her, her face looked a lot grumpier than what I remember, which tends to happen with senior cats. Otherwise, she looked exactly the same. She's still a very petite little brown tabby that I had 11 and a half years ago. Your old lady meow? We parted ways against our wills when I was in my early 20s, and she was about 2, so now she's about 14, I'm in my mid-30s. We've both probably been through a lot of changes. We've had our share of adventures. I wish cats could talk so that she could tell me where she's been for the last 11 and a half years, but you know what? I'm glad that she's come to me now to be taken care of in her older golden years.
Whole new meaning to the cat came back. And I am dying to know as well where Loli was.
Yes, I really wish cats could talk. My favorite detail of the story was her face looked grumpier after all these years. Yeah, that is the ultimate cat versus dog story. I mean, mine's like literally my dog at my feet, maybe in case I have cheese. But no, cats come back in a decade. I love it. All right. Well, you know this is going to be my segue. Dogs out there right now. And temperatures are also climbing. Let me start you off with the current temperatures. We're going to see them hit the double digits in the next couple of days. Already 10 up towards the Sunshine Coast, 9 at YVR, 12 south of the border. This is basically where our temperatures will sit through Wednesday and into Thursday, along with freezing levels that are up around 2,500 meters. Here's the bulk of the system that is bringing us subtropical water vapor, I should say, and temperatures from the Hawaiian Islands. So a bit of a pineapple express, as we call them. Technically, they are atmospheric rivers. It is moving through quite quickly, though. So Thursday afternoon, we should be on the other side of it. Watch as I take you through the forecast. The rainfall you can see in green, the time counter at the top, 2 p.m. tomorrow. Still looking at that steady rain across Metro Vancouver. We'll actually see it lighten up a little bit tomorrow evening. I think we've got one more round overnight into Thursday morning before we'll actually see some sunny breaks on the back end of that Thursday. But we will be left with 100 millimeters for parts of Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley, higher amounts towards the North Shore and the west side of Vancouver Island. We will see that moisture track across the rest of the province. The bulk of it's on the south coast, but something to watch for in Prince George, Williams Lake, Kelowna. Freezing rain tomorrow as temperatures skirt past the freezing mark as it warms up tomorrow. Might see some slippery conditions on the roads. And you're seeing that in the bigger picture here. Purple is the snow, but some hints of pink, which is the mix and the freezing rain. Tracking across to the Kootenays tomorrow, where Highway 3 is under a snowfall warning. See that steady stream of moisture for the south coast lifting up as we head into Thursday. And that is when we should see the majority of our snowpack for areas lower than 900 meters melted by Thursday afternoon. So that is a lot of snow to melt in the next 36 hours. I need a much more seasonal and calmer forecast Friday onward. I think we will all take a few light showers this weekend.
I think so. And just as you were talking, I happened to look out our window here and I'm in for a little bit of a shock. I gotta say, it's raining hard.
Raining hard, yeah. And it's like this for the next 24 hours. I'll see you in your raincoat.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
We're getting set to battle for the puck. A look at the Canadian women's hockey team heading to Beijing for the Winter Olympics. That's next.
I take care of my dad at a care home, and I noticed a lot of the older people were having a hard time hearing, through plexiglass and masks. Everybody's what? And so I'm also a musician, and I thought maybe an audio solution, a microphone with some speakers. Then, of course, that makes everything even louder and more noisy. And one day I came across a Kickstarter thing. As Velo had an invention, a mask that just made a smiling motion as you talk. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool, but it's not solving a problem. Then I thought, what if I could, instead of my amplifying words, what if I could make my voice seen on this screen? And that's when I started looking into it and realized I could. A mask with an LED screen built in a computer chip, and a lithium battery. And we use speech to text and then send it Bluetooth to the LED mask.
This is voice, viewer, personal, closed captioning, mask, or that.
Why I came up with it, he has dementia as well. And, trying to talk to him, he couldn't really understand words, but I'd go in and if I had a shirt on, said Toronto, he would say Toronto. Like he can read words and talk the words. And so when I came up with this invention and started using it in there, he would repeat all the words that he was seeing. And so I knew right away, well, this is making an impact on him. He's noticing that this is easier. He can communicate with me. This particular one, I could speed up the words and we can make the words flash so that you'll see the words instantly. But one of the ideas was we wanted a chip and a product line that we could expand after COVID. So we also, with the computer chip, kind of shortage, that's the cheapest one. So we went with a better chip. And what that allows us is now we can incorporate an LED badge, talking badge. We can also incorporate it into a desk sign so that if you're in an office or retail or anything like that, we can have our words appearing on this type of thing as well.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Enjoy CBC Radio 1 while you're on the go with the free CBC Listen app. Get live access to your favorite CBC radio programs, like the early edition with Stephen Quinn. Missed your morning show? You can also listen to Radio 1 programs on demand and browse CBC Music playlists, podcasts, and more. It's love at first listen. Download the free CBC Listen app today.
Welcome back. China's pre-Olympic lockdowns have hit a third city, and that country is just trying to keep COVID variants from disrupting the Winter Games with just over 3 weeks until they begin. Today, Canada named its women's hockey team, and as Jamie Strachan shows us, they're also working to keep clear of COVID.
The United States wins gold for the first time in 20 years.
It's been 4 long years since the Canadian women's hockey team watched their bitter rivals celebrate gold in Korea. Today, the team that will seek revenge in Beijing was announced, made up mostly of familiar faces, but also a handful of excited newcomers.
I've been writing 2022 on the bottom of my stick, for 4 years, and to finally say you made that team is really special.
There's more than the U.S. to worry about. COVID is affecting rosters across the sports world, and this team is no different.
Obviously, it's front of mind. Everybody's, aware of the critical time frame we are in right now, heading into Beijing.
After COVID infiltrated the team's ranks in December, it canceled all of its games leading up to Beijing and hunkered down in Calgary.
We will remain in Calgary, train here up until the 26th. Again, as mentioned, we'll be in a bubble, so we'll be secluded from the public. Even within our group, we'll be very careful and diligent.
Athletes traveling to Beijing must test negative in 2 pre-departure tests. A positive means they can't travel to China. Jen Botterill was part of 3 gold medal winning Canadian teams and says preparing for the Olympics is stressful enough without having to worry about getting sick.
It's been an additional challenge for these athletes. And talking to them, yes, there's moments where it can lead to some additional pressure or anxiety.
While not being able to compete ahead of Beijing may be less than ideal, Tokyo's Summer Games gives some reason for optimism.
A lot of the teams that actually had not gone to multiple competitions and hadn't had any races for some of them 19 months before the Games did extremely well.
A pattern the Canadian team hopes continues in Beijing as it seeks to reclaim its place on top of the podium. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, there's one thing that Canadians have in common with penguins. We find a way to take our winter in stride. And some are even willing to walk the talk. These king penguins at the Calgary Zoo got a chance to stretch their legs yesterday. The city is having a few relatively warm days after a bout of frigid temperatures. It's the 10th year of what the zoo calls the Royal Waddle. And if these birds look a bit too dapper for a brief outing, well, that's just how they stroll. Always cute. I love me some penguins for sure. Okay, that is it for our show tonight. We will see you back here tomorrow.